Last time we were taking a look at the conditions that led to the rise of the Nazi Party in Germany, and mainly what it was out of fear that led Great Britain and France and the United States into taking such drastic actions and measures against Germany and the Treaty of Versailles. Fear that Germany is going to one day come back and fight them in another war. And ironically, that fear, the fear that Germany is going to come back, and their desire to completely to curtail all of Germany's economy and its military, backfires. And what is it that Master Oogway says in Kung Fu Panda? He says, "You often meet your destiny on your way to avoid it," or whatever the case may be. And it's kind of true in this particular instance that they were trying to avoid Germany coming back on them, and Germany is going to take that, their extreme conditions, and they're going to then want more than what they've been given, and they're going to turn against France and England. And so fear is kind of an interesting motivating factor that we generally tends to shape our perceptions, but if we only focus on it as our driving actions, it generally tends to create our demise. And so it became a self-fulfilling prophecy, right, as they tried to enact these restrictions. Taking a look at some of their the creation of the anti-Semitism that in Germany, there was a massive campaign that Hitler created in order to blame the Jewish people for the war, right? And so everyone, as we talked about in the last lecture, the end of World War I and the Treaty of Versailles, right? Germany's looking for someone to blame for all of the problems that they're now experiencing, and due to what is in the 1920s, the German government was called the Weimar Republic, and so they're trying to find someone to blame for that weakened republic, and so they start to turn to the people that they consider to be in power, the wealthy in society, and predominantly Jewish bankers were predominantly wealthy, and so they suggested that they turn their backs on Germany because they only care about their own self-interest. And so this poster says here, he is to blame for the war, right? And so the pointing the finger, and then you see the Star of David on his lapel, suggesting that it's the Jew that is to blame for the war, creating this animosity. I wanted to show you just a clip here about this mindset, this Darwinist. They take Darwinism and they manipulate it into what is known as social Darwinism. And so the argument that we see happening in Germany, but not just Germany, the social Darwinism in a large part originates in the United States. Social Darwinism suggests that certain races have evolved more than other races. And so taking Darwin's idea of evolution and then applying it to racism, right? So suggesting that there are some races that are just naturally better, naturally more gifted because they've evolved to be. And so Germany's going to kind of cling on to that idea of social Darwinism. And it's going to then try to apply it on a mass scale to society. Let's take that science and then apply it to kind of social conditions. And this clip that I'm going to show you is going to kind of give you an overview of that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Darwin's ideas and the longer title of Darwin's ideas on evolution, and how I believe it's his cousin that takes those ideas and then applies them to race.
In America, a group led by the renowned craniologist Samuel George Morton had begun to collect the skulls of different races and compare them.
Skulls were chosen to be measured because it was reckoned that the skull was the container of the most important part of the human body, the brain. The bigger the skull, the bigger the brain. The shape of the skull, the shape of the brain.
The American School of Race Scientists concluded that the races, as measured through their skulls, were so different as to be separate species. Tasmanians, Africans, American Indians were not the lower races of men. They were perhaps not fully human at all. One writer compared the extermination of these races by white settlers as being like the melting of snow before the advancing rays of the sun. But the theory that was to have the most powerful impact upon race came not from the anatomists or the skull measurers, but from the work of one of the 19th century's greatest minds.
At some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world. The break between man and his nearest allies will then be widened, for it will intervene between man and a more civilized state, and some ape as low as a baboon, instead of as now between the Negro or Australian and the gorilla. Charles Darwin, 1890.
Charles Darwin is very well known for writing The Origin of Species in the 1800s. This book gave rise to evolutionary theory. What people don't know is that there was actually a longer original title to this book, and that was On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. Now, copies and editions that they made afterwards eliminated that phrase about the favored races. Evidently, they understood then that it was politically incorrect.
Race scientists and social reformers visited prisons to study the criminal races, and among them was Charles Darwin's cousin, Francis Galton. Galton was terrified by the fact that the underclass were reproducing faster than the middle classes. Darwinian law had, it seemed, been turned on its head. The least fit were surviving. Reversing this situation became his mission.
Darwin had looked backwards. Where had we come from? Galton turned the telescope round and looked forward. Where were we going?
In particular, this second clip here takes a look at how Germany applies this scientific racism within their society. And so the idea of, it's called eugenics or social Darwinism. Eugenics is more of the kind of the study of genes and how genes are different based on different races. The idea for this was that science is going to have to help nature along, right? So the idea is that some races are superior to other races. That's kind of their battle cry, and so what they need to do as scientists is to kind of help that needle along. And it kind of gets back to this idea that as they're taking a look at the population of the world, that people that they considered to be inferior races were larger in population, and so they believed that that somehow something went wrong within this idea of evolution, because what they considered to be the superior race, the Aryan race, was somehow going to be outnumbered or is outnumbered, and it's going to lead to a problem later on. And so what they're trying to do is to correct the problem, right? So that's the sick mindset that they're in. So just take a look at what's going on in Germany at the time.
So they could work in the labor camps. He wanted them for medical research. His SS file reveals him as a specialist in genetics and eugenics. Mengele shared Hitler's obsession with racial purity. His dream was to copy the blonde, blue-eyed model of Aryan perfection, exemplified by members of the Hitler Youth, and then develop the means to genetically manufacture it on a massive scale. At Auschwitz, Mengele was particularly fascinated by identical twins.
So these are some of the studies that they would do, scientific studies on children.
Sharing the same genetic blueprint,
concentration camps.
Twins allowed him a unique opportunity to experiment on one and compare the results with the other. Now Mengele was presented with as many twins as he wanted.
These are all identical twins used for medical experiments. Hundreds of twins from all over Europe were brought to this camp. They were numbered, but their origin and even their names are unknown.
It's the children showing their
was Eva
tattoos.
Moses, seen here a day after liberation. Eva remembers meeting Mengele after receiving several toxic injections into her arm.
Then Mengele declared, laughing sarcastically, he said, "Too bad. She's so young. She has only 2 weeks to live." I refuse to accept his verdict. I refuse to die.
In all, Mengele murdered 3,000 twins. Some after chemicals were injected directly into their eyeballs. His aim? To turn the colour of eyes from inferior brown to Aryan blue.
So what we see within this is the scientific experiments that were done within Germany in order to quote-unquote purify the races, to see what science can do to help this idea of evolution along. I just want to go through quickly here just some of the posters that we see coming out of Germany in order to create this, animosity towards Jewish people. This is the town in Vinnytsia, Ukraine. Stalin's secret police killed more than 9,000 citizens in 1937 and 1938. The Nazis uncovered the atrocity. They found out about it in May 1943, and then they put spin on it, right? We talked about what spin is. They repackaged this incident to say that it was really the Jews that killed all the people. And so this poster was distributed in Germany and German-occupied areas of the Soviet Union to develop anti-Semitic and anti-Soviet attitudes, all right? So to connect this idea of communism and the idea of anti-Semitism, combining them into one poster, saying we should hate both of them. We've talked about this one before as we were taking a look at black, white, and gray propaganda. This is another propaganda poster that comes out of this time. Jews are lice, the cause of typhus. This one here, the Jewish doctor who comes in and brings with him over here, we see the Grim Reaper, right? So the Jewish doctor comes in and only brings death and destruction with him. This one talks about, the Soviet Union here and the United States and England, and who's behind, who's the one that's pulling the strings, who's the man behind the curtain, so to speak. It is the Jew, right? So they're building up this massive conspiracy that the Jewish nation, the Jewish people throughout the world are working together in this type of secret society that are trying to undermine Western civilization, and so creating this fear, this rhetoric of constant control. So it's not just Jewish people in Germany; it's this global effort to try to rid the world of Jews because of the argument here is of inherent evil that's with them. This is another one poster again, thinking about protecting the most vulnerable, about protecting women. Right? He thinks he's clever, stealing himself a German woman. So again, we see this is a little bit more. This is agitative propaganda, right? In order to say, what, we need to stop this, we need to intervene, otherwise our women are all going to be carried off, or whatever the case may be. Here's an Austrian anti-Semitic poster, the Jews in Austria, right? So again, we have to be concerned about this everywhere and what they're bringing with them, right? They're going to destroy the church. They're going to bring people to the gallows. And here you have this kind of either or. We've talked about some logical fallacies. Propaganda is riddled with them. Here we see, which do you want, a good Nazi German or an Eastern European Jewish Bolshevik, right? So depicting Jewish people as outsiders, communists, Soviets, right, with exaggerated features in order to give them this kind of fear, make them seem less human. A big part of propaganda to create fear and hatred is to dehumanize a group, and once you dehumanize a group, then you can start justifying atrocities, horrors, violence against them. This is The Eternal Jew. This is the book cover that came out in 1937. The Eternal Jew examines the origins of the Jewish people and how they came to Europe. And so it's this anti-Semitic, this German propaganda that came out to talk about how the Jews are the secret organization secretly planning to uncover or undermine the Western world and to bring everyone under their power. And then they turned this into a documentary, The Eternal Jew. And I wanted to show you a couple of clips from this documentary to take a look at the propaganda, some Nazi propaganda to create this hatred. So think about how they're representing, how they're dehumanizing Jewish people, and also thinking about how they're trying to create fear as they dehumanize.
Palestine is international Jewry, though the Jews are numerically insignificant there. Here at the Wailing Wall, they gather and mourn the fall of Jerusalem. Is a matter of choice, and in keeping with their entire history. 4,000 years ago, their Hebrew ancestors were already wandering.
So think about the spin that they're putting on this history,
where they ran a lucrative grain business for a while. When the country farmers and other Egyptians rose against the foreign usurers and speculators, they wandered once more and plundered their way to the Promised Land. They settled there, mercilessly looting the culturally superior rightful inhabitants. Here, in the course of centuries, from the Oriental Far Eastern racial mixture, with Negroid, ultimate mongrelized Jews developed. Foreign from us Europeans, born of totally different racial elements, they differ from us in body and above all in soul. We probably would never have been bothered by them had they stayed in their Oriental home. But the cosmopolitan empire of Alexander the Great, reaching from the Near East across half the Mediterranean, and especially the boundless world empire of the Romans, brought about the evolution of the trade and migratory traits of the Jews, who soon spread across the open Mediterranean area. While some of them settled in the large urban traffic and trade centers of the Mediterranean.
Think about, as it's creating this propaganda, right? What does this look like, right? They're creating an image here with this map
and England
and the spread of Jewish people.
In Spain and France, the people rose openly against them in the 13th and 14th centuries, and they wandered on, mainly to Germany. There they followed the path of the Aryan culture, creative Germans colonizing the East, till they finally found the gigantic new untapped reservoir in the Polish and Russian sections of Eastern Europe. The 19th century, with its muddled ideas about human equality and freedom, gave the Jews a great lift. From Eastern Europe, they spread across the entire continent during the 19th and 20th centuries, and then across the world.
And if you didn't catch on what they're trying to do here, it's going to be a little bit more explicit on the connection.
Parallel to these Jewish wanderings throughout the world is the migration of a similarly restless animal, the rat. Rats have been parasites on mankind from the very beginning. Their home is Asia, from which they migrated in gigantic hordes over Russia and the Balkans into Europe. They'd spread over all of Europe. Toward the end of the 19th century, with the growing shipping traffic, they took possession of America as well, and eventually Africa and the Far East. Wherever rats turn up, they carry destruction to the land by destroying mankind's goods and nourishing diseases and plagues, such as cholera, dysentery, and typhoid fever. They are cunning and cruel, and usually appear in massive hordes. They represent the elements of sneakiness as among animals, just as the Jews do among mankind.
Some of these ideas something to think about is first of all, how many logical fallacies did we see within that? But again, this idea of dehumanizing this group of people, suggesting that connecting them with rats, that they need to be exterminated, just like rats need to be exterminated because they bring problems, they bring plague, they bring havoc with them, right? So it's connecting that mindset, and it's completely looking over the actual historical events of what actually happened, being kicked out of every place, and all the historical anti-Semitism throughout the world. And it's just focusing on how this is a group of people that's constantly trying to take over and to spread their ideas. Wanted to show you one more clip from The Eternal Jew, and it's this one. It's showing inside the ghetto, the Jewish ghetto. Just give you some context on this before we could go on the Jewish ghetto. As they were, the initial kind of phase of the Nazis was to gather Jewish people up in cities and then put them into one small area and confine them to that area in the cities. And this was the step before they then took them to the concentration camps. And so what they did is then brought in cameras to show how dismal the conditions were, without really giving them the full information that this is from the ghettos, right? That they were forced into these horrific living conditions.
Auf Deutsch gesagt, die jüdischen Behausungen sind unsauber und verwahrlost.
So showing how they live in filth, neglecting sanitary
Man muss bedenken,
conditions.
dass diese Juden nicht etwa arm sind. Durch jahrzehntelangen Handel haben sie genug Geld angehäuft, um sich und ihrer Familie ein sauberes und behagliches Heim schaffen zu können. Aber sie wohnen Generationen hindurch in denselben schmutzigen und verwandten Wohnlöchern. Dort halten sie auch unbekümmert um die feierlose Umgebung ihre zeremoniell hergedachten Gebete ab. Die Pendelbewegungen des Oberkörpers gehören zum vorschriftsmäßigen Lesen.
So as we think about this, right, how is this creating kind of this fear, this animosity, this kind of takeover, and at the same time this hatred, this dehumanization, this feeling of superiority over them, right? So it's kind of interesting how it's creating the fear, and at the same time we're somehow better than this, and at the same time we need to repress this, otherwise we're going to be destroyed. All happening simultaneously within the propaganda. But to think about this in terms of our discussion of jazz, what is the narrative? So we think about what was the narrative of jazz and who controls it within jazz. What's the narrative here and who controls it, right? So another difference as we think about what's the difference between art and propaganda is who has the narrative, who controls it, right? Just a couple, you can kind of see, I just want to show you some images here to close. You can imagine the amount of hatred that people were feeling as they were constantly inundated with this messaging that Jews were evil and they're going to take over. Here we see on Jewish storefronts that was put Jews and the Star of David, so people would know who owned it, who was the owner, so you would know not to shop in it, right? That was the message. But again, what is the narrative and who controls it? Here's some Secret Service men are putting up a sign in front of a Jewish business which reads "Not one penny to the Jews." And so the idea here is that you don't want to go in and patronize these people who try to destroy us by signing the Versailles Treaty, or historically are these vicious people that come in and try to destroy civilization. That we don't want to fund that, right? That we want to be good, quote unquote, German citizens and find someone else to patronize. So as we think about this one is just the acts of terror that started against the Jewish people. This was the synagogue in Berlin in 1938 that was completely destroyed, and so they then start rounding up Jewish people and putting them, as I mentioned, into the ghettos. This is a neighborhood in Krakow and in Poland. They're put up against the wall as they're going to be taken from their homes and then put into concentration camps. And ironically, this is, as they started to, the ghettos started to be too small. They wanted, different kind of areas to put them in. They developed concentration camps. And this is the concentration camp in Auschwitz, which is the most notorious concentration camps because it was the largest death camp. But on the the gate of as you enter into the Auschwitz. It says in German "Arbeit macht frei," and that means work makes you free. Concentration camps, by and large, were slave labor camps where people would go in and they would have these prisoners. It wasn't always Jewish people. It was also gypsies. It was anyone that was handicapped or homosexual or anyone that the Germans felt was inferior to them. They would put them in the concentration camps and they'd work long hours for no pay. And what that did was it helped to revitalize the German economy. And two companies that are still around today that heavily benefited from this would be Mercedes and BMW. Greatly benefited from this, and Germany was able to then rebound economically and start to become once again a world powerhouse as far as industry, and also they then turned this into the military. But mainly they would round them up, and this is herds rounded into trains of the ghetto, then shipped off to concentration camps. And again, as I mentioned, it wasn't just Jewish people; it was anyone that was considered by Germans to be deviant. Some Holocaust victims in front of a French train on the cattle train or cattle cars, as Wiesel. Some of you may have read Wiesel's The Night. Talks about the horrors on the cattle trains. The cattle cars out to the camps. This is an emaciated man, very skinny, a survivor from the concentration camps as he's waiting to be deported to a death camp in Poland. And what we see within this, what the Germans did is they put them into concentration camps. They would generally work people until they could not work them anymore. And so then what they would do is they would go in and they would find the weakest amongst them, those that are sick, and they would take them from the concentration camp and say, hey, we're going to give you, some food, we're going to give you some medical attention, a shower, come with us and you'll get, healed. And then they would put them on those cattle cars and ship them off into concentration camps to be killed. They originally started just having the people in the concentration camps and the death camps started digging holes, big ditches, and then they would just shoot them. But then as the war started, it became much more, bullets became much more of a scarce resource, and so they decided we need to find other means to put them to death. And so just some of the events that's happening in the concentration camps here. They're forced into labor, creating their own factories in the concentration camps. And this is a Jewish ghetto, just to show you as they gather them up, right? All of the family belongings just kind of thrown carelessly in the streets. And by and large, what they would then do is they would take all of the family possessions, anything that was valuable like art or gold, and then the Nazis would have them for themselves. And this is them being lined up. The women and children who have been selected for death, they walk in line towards the gas chamber. And these are Soviet soldiers. They taken a look at the recently burned corpses in the concentration camp. This was an Austrian camp that when they were liberated, we can take a look at how thin, how emaciated they were. Dachau was another death camp that contained, this particular railway car contained 2,000 to 3,000 prisoners who were evacuated. And then here's all of the rings, the jewelry, as they would collect all their valuables, and they would then have them for their own private wealth. And this is one of the medical tables used to remove gold teeth, right? So it's, anything. It wasn't just your jewelry and whatnot. It was anything that was valuable. So they'd even take out your gold teeth fillings that you have. This is the children showing their tattooed numbers. Every person that was in a concentration camp was numbered, and so people who deny the Holocaust, deny the numbers and everything, what they fail to realize is how good the Germans were at keeping records, and that everyone was numbered. They had paper trail of everything, and so to their own detriment, I guess, they were so good at keeping records that we now have a really good idea of how many people were in them. This is the gas chamber at Mauthausen. I'll show you a couple more pictures of Mauthausen. I went there a couple of years ago. Dachau, another this is a cremation oven where they would then burn the bodies after they killed them. This is just inside one of the homes, the barracks, where they would keep about 200 people. This person just revealing how is kind of starvation. how skinny he was. Again, this is people in concentration camps cheering for their liberation, cheering for the freedom. I don't know if many of you have been to the Holocaust Museum in D.C. This is the one that really struck me the most, this room here. And what you see is that you have shoes on either side of this really long room, probably about, I don't know, 50, 60 feet, maybe more. And then it would be stacked with shoes. And then there's this poem on the back here, and this is what it says. We are the shoes, we are the last witnesses, we are the shoes from grandchildren, grandfathers from Prague, Paris, and Amsterdam, and because we are only made of fabric and leather and not blood and flesh, each one of us avoided the hellfire. And so kind of interesting as we think about this, right? Think about the sadism that goes into trying to exterminate an entire race of people that as they killed them in the gas chambers, they then cremated their bodies so that nothing remained. But what did remain, what was valuable to these Nazis, was their shoes, because they can then give them to another person. So thinking about the loss of humanity, how people weren't even considered it's important enough to be cared for within their remains, right? And this is a picture of me going to Mauthausen in Austria, one of the labor camps there. This is the students that I took over there to go through. A group of humanities students went in, and this is the front entryway here. And just right over here, kind of off camera, there's a swimming pool for all the SS guards for them to be able to enjoy a lap of luxury in this prison camp. This was the first place that they would then usher them into after they walked through those gates that I just showed you. These are showers. They would kind of wash them down, make sure that they didn't have any diseases, and try to clean them up a little bit before they then proceeded to camp. On the right-hand side, you see one of the barracks that they would use, and these are mainly prefab homes. They were made very cheaply, and they would then line them in this kind of mock village within the concentration camp, and then they would put about 200 people per home within them. This is the bathroom that two housing units would share, and so about 400 people would share this. And this is, again, some pictures as these Jewish individuals were liberated. We came in and took some photographs for record. This is the gas chamber. Mauthausen wasn't known for its death camp. It didn't have a huge gas chamber like Auschwitz or Dachau. This was relatively small. It would probably only be about 20 feet by 20 feet. And then what they would do is they would put these pipes in there, make it look like a shower, and then they would just pump gas in and then kill them. And then as I turned the corner, this is what got me the most. This was the crematorium where they would then burn the bodies. On the outside, so this would be a kind of an earlier picture that I showed you of us walking in, right? So over here is kind of the pool, and then down here is a soccer field. And so all the SS guards, they had their own soccer league. They would enjoy a lap of luxury. So while all the horrors that were going on inside, they were, the SS guards who were watching over them, they were considered special. They were considered, the best of the best. And so they were able to have a swimming pool and a soccer team, and kind of interesting the normalcy that's happening with the horrors on what's going on the other side. And so, anyway, so this is giving you a sense of some of the problems that we see happening in Germany as a result of the rise of the Nazi Party that we've been talking about, and how they're using propaganda to create this animosity, to create this fear, this hatred towards a group of people in order to justify eventually exterminating them as they're influenced by eugenics.